gland. We will discuss anterior pituitary gland, some diseases today, and then about posterior pituitary gland in the next class. Now this is diagram representing you about hypothalamus, then pituitary. Hypothalamus, apart from controlling the secretion of various hormones from pituitary gland, is also important for controlling temperature, water balance, eating behavior, and so on. But they are not to be discussed by me, will be discussed by some of the teachers in next classes. Now, if you see hypothalamus, it synthesizes and releases various hypophysiotropic hormones, means trophic hormones which goes and act on pituitary gland and result in secretion of various types of hormone from the pituitary gland like TRH, CRH, GnRH, GHRH, PRH. So they act on pituitary gland. Now, if you see the diagrammatic representation, upon receiving some stimulus, hypothalamus secrete these trophic hormones, which goes and act on pituitary gland, from where there is a release of second trophic hormones like ACTH or growth hormone, LH, FSH, TSH, which goes and act on target endocrine gland, from where an hormone is secreted and which will result in negative feedback inhibition of hormone secretion. So from anterior pituitary, we have release of TSH under influence of TRH, ACTH under influence of CRH, GH under influence of growth hormone releasing factor, and LH and FSH under influence of gonadotropin releasing hormone. Now prolactin releasing
This call is now being recorded.
इसको हटा दे. अच्छा, automatic. Now, except prolactin or trophic hormones are stimulatory to pituitary gland, prolactin always remains under inhibitory control. So, like TSH, ACTH, they are all under stimulatory control from hypothalamus, but prolactin is under inhibitory control. So, except prolactin, all are stimulatory hormones. Now, prolactin, because act on breast and after pregnancy or delivery, is required for lactation. So as I have told you, synthesis of different anterior pituitary hormone by different cell population. So these are different cell population which are present in pituitary gland, and they are resulting in secretion of various hormones. In last class, we have discussed about diseases of adrenal gland, where we have discussed about importance of ACTH, and in the sequence of ACTH, there is presence of melanocortin sequence, which is also responsible for pigmentation seen in ACTH dependent Cushing syndrome. Now, pituitary, CRH and ACTH are released in response to either CRH or any stress of the body or any hypoglycemia. It will result in secretion of ACTH from pituitary, which will result in glucocorticoid and negative feedback loop. Since we have already discussed all these details in last two classes, so we will not discuss these diseases now. Similarly, if you remember, before lockdown has begun, when we were discussing endocrinology classes, we have already discussed about the diseases of thyroid gland, and so we are again not going to discuss about disease of thyroid gland. But an important point to remember here is, when you are seeing a patient of secondary hypothyroidism, means disease at the level of pituitary, or tertiary hypothyroidism, disease at the level of hypothalamus, measurement of T4 is important, in contrast to primary hypothyroidism, where we measure both T4 and TSH. Because in primary hypothyroidism, when you have hypothyroidism, T4 is low and TSH will rise. But in pituitary or hypothalamic dependent hypothyroidism, TSH remains normal or low despite the fact that T4 is reduced. So the relationship between T4 and TSH is lost. Now coming to an important hormone, that is growth hormone. which is secreted from pituitary gland. There are various stimulus which result in increased secretion of growth hormone from the pituitary, and there are some stimulus which inhibits its release. Now, this is a pre-PG question sometime asked. If you see the factors which stimulate growth hormone, they are hypoglycemia. And again, if you remember last class, we have discussed about insulin-induced hypoglycemia. So insulin-induced hypoglycemia results in secretion of two important hormones from pituitary, that is ACTH and growth hormone. Apart from that, L-DOPA, arginine, sleep, serotonin, exercise, stress, morphine, all these are the stimulus for release of growth hormone from pituitary gland. If we see the factors that suppresses growth hormone release, then they are somatostatin, they are glucose, it is alpha blockade, and corticosteroids. So there are some factors which stimulate secretion of growth hormone. There are some factors which inhibit the release of growth hormone from pituitary gland. So you must remember this table. Now, growth hormone is required in prepubertal period for longitudinal growth of the body, for attaining a height which is also determined by our genetic potential. After puberty, after we have achieved our final height, still growth hormone is required in adult life. Because it has to perform important anabolic functions like protein metabolism, maintenance of muscle mass. It is required for doing lipolysis, meaning keeping fat mass less in our body. It stimulates insulin release, but at the same time, it decreases peripheral glucose utilization, means it increases insulin resistance. Now, if somebody who is growth hormone deficient in adult age, which means the fat mass will increase, the muscle mass will decrease, and there will be some other manifestations which we will discuss briefly during adult growth hormone deficiency. So first, I'm going to discuss in brief to you about short stature. Short stature is a very common referral for endocrine OPDs. Obviously, this topic is going to be discussed probably by some of the pediatric teachers, but I will discuss with you in brief about evaluation of short stature, which will help you even in your pediatrics examination, how to define short stature. Sometimes it's a subjective phenomena. If parents are short, the childs are also going to be short because genetically they are destined to be short. But if we see the definition, there are various types. The first is when the height of a child is less than third centile or less than 2 standard deviation below the mean, like you see in this growth chart. Or when the height is excessively short for mid-parental height. See this child, his mid-parental height is at this trajectory, and now presently he's growing at this trajectory. So if you plot this to the final height, currently the child is short. So genetic comes into picture. Or growth hormone velocity percentile over 1 year is less than 25th percentile. Now, just to tell you, between 4 to 8 years of age, any child who is growing less than 4 centimeter per year is a short child, needs evaluation. Average increase in height between 4 to 8 years of age is around 5 to 6 centimeter. Now, also, when we see that timing of growth, now this is sometime asking pre-PG, the maximum growth takes place during intrauterine period. At birth, the approximate length is around 50 centimeter. After birth, it grows by around 25 centimeter in first year, then by 10 centimeter in second year, and in third and fourth year by 7 centimeter, and so on, as you are seeing in this table. That is why I am telling you, before puberty, between 4 to 8 or 9 years of age, if any child is growing by less than 4 centimeter in a year, this is pathological and this needs to be worked up or evaluated. Also, there are important body proportions which we should measure because they will help us in differential diagnosis of short stature. At birth, upper segment to lower segment ratio is 1.7:1. And at 7 years, it becomes 1:1. And after attaining puberty, the adult body proportions are 0.85 to 0.9. If we see arm span, the arm span to the height ratio is -3 centimeter between 1 to 7 years of age, and between 8 to 12, they become normal. In puberty, after puberty, the ratio of arm span to height, or means arm span is more by around 4 centimeter in boys and by +1 centimeter in girls. So if your arm span is more than 5 centimeter at least, it is abnormal and we have to look for certain disorders. There are some important definitions also, which we should find out, like chronological age, which is calendar age. Bone age, which is age for which bone maturation is at 50th percentile. There is height age, which means age for which height is at 50th percentile. So we should remember these important definitions, because when you are seeing a child of short stature, you are going to use these important definition. How to calculate target height? Target height is mid-parental height, means you take height of the father, height of the mother, divide it by 2, whatever is value is coming, you add plus 6.5 centimeter in that for boys and subtract 6.5 for the girls. Also from the X-ray of left hand of hand, we can assess bone age, and from bone age we can predict the height. Now we are not going to discuss these things in detail because they are not beyond you, but you must have some idea. Now when you see a child with short stature, you should differentiate between proportionate short stature and disproportionate short stature. Proportionate short stature means your body proportions are within the range which we have discussed in previous slides. Now, the causes for proportionate short stature include various endocrinopathies like growth hormone deficiency, hypothyroidism, Cushing syndrome, malnutrition, various GI causes, renal causes, systemic disorders, and intrauterine growth retardation. While disproportionate short stature means when your upper segment, lower segment ratio is not maintaining within the normative range. The important causes are skeletal dysplasias, rickets, which is because of vitamin D deficiency, and various other causes, vertebral anomalies, Turner syndrome, Down syndrome, Russell-Silver syndrome, pseudo-hypoparathyroidism. So there are causes for proportionate short stature, there are causes for disproportionate short stature. Now when you have seen this patient, you are suspecting short stature, the next important step is how to make diagnosis. For biochemical diagnosis, it's a common mistake which has been committed by general practitioner outside. There is no role of measuring growth hormone, random growth hormone. Remember, growth hormone is secreted in pulses in all of us, and most of the time it is not measurable. So falsely an alarm is raised to the family that growth hormone is low. As I have discussed with you in last classes, for deficiency states, we perform stimulation test. So similarly, if you are suspecting growth hormone deficiency, we have to perform growth hormone stimulation test. Now, before you perform growth hormone stimulation test, there are certain prerequisites. What are those? Patient should be euthyroid. Thyroid status should be normal. Patient should be eucortisolic. Cortisol status should be normal. Patient should be negative for IgA-TTG, which is a biochemical marker for celiac disease. So patient should be negative for celiac disease, and this disease is quite common in North India. Prevalence rate is as high as 1 in 300. They should be normal. For isolated growth hormone deficiency, we should perform 2 stimulation tests before making a diagnosis, and priming with sex steroid should be done in peripubertal age, means after 8 years of age. There are various stimulus which include physiological stimulus like sleep, fasting, and exercise. There are some pharmacological stimulus like insulin tolerance test, clonidine, arginine, glucagon, L-DOPA, propranolol, and growth hormone releasing hormone. We will not discuss the details how to perform this. This is beyond your level of discussion, but these are various stimulus which result in increased secretion of growth hormone. Now, when you perform growth hormone stimulation test in children, the growth hormone should rise more than 10 nanograms per ml, right? And if the levels are less than 10 but more than 5, it is partial growth hormone deficiency, and if it is less than 5, it is severe growth hormone deficiency. Now these are some of the photographs of our patients which I will like to show you how we have evaluated various patients of short stature. See this child who has come to us, and on evaluation it has been found that this child is having ectopic thyroid gland. This is technetium uptake scan, which we have discussed during the thyroid classes. Normally thyroid should be visible here, but the thyroid gland is present in the lingual area. Also, if you see the bone age is only 2 or 3 years, while the child chronological age is 7 years. So the child is short. Now he's on the follow-up from last 10 years. He has attained a good amount of height just on replacement therapy with thyroid hormones. Another short child, as you see, number of deformities, including leg deformity, genu varum, and there are huge osteoclastoma which are present in the bone. This child is suffering from celiac disease, malabsorption, severe vitamin D deficiency, which has resulted in tertiary hyperparathyroidism. Another child, short child, and if you see this X-ray, this is bilateral nephrocalcinosis. This is another short child who is suffering from hypothyroidism. If you again remember the previous classes where we have shown you various photographs of hypothyroid patient, from facial appearance. From facial appearance, you can diagnose that this child is suffering from hypothyroidism. Bone is markedly delayed, and this is X-ray pelvis of the same child where you see epiphyseal dysgenesis, which is characteristic of hypothyroidism. Now, this is another short child. This is classical growth hormone deficiency, and this is MRI pituitary. If you see, pituitary gland is absent from pituitary fossa. This is sagittal section. The posterior pituitary bright spot is present here. This is ectopic posterior pituitary bright spot, and chiasma is absent. So the classical triad of panhypopituitarism is present in the short child, and this is the child which require actually growth hormone. Why I am showing you all these photographs? When we see a short child always does not mean deficiency of growth hormone. As we have shown you and discussed with you, there are many more causes of growth hormone, many more causes of short stature, which we should find out. And growth hormone is needed only in a very select number of patients. Now, apart from this, there are various causes of acquired pituitary deficiency. If you see these busy looking slides, they can be traumatic. So this is an important history. When you suspect hypopituitarism, you have to take history of trauma, which can be surgical, which can be radiation therapy mediated, or which can be traumatic. In fact, traumatic brain injury can manifest years after the initial event has happened. It can be infiltrative or inflammatory disorder, various infectious disorder, vascular, neoplastic, functional, and so on. You can read the details of these tables from the standard textbooks of medicine. So there are a number of causes of acquired pituitary deficiencies which are seen. How to assess anterior pituitary functions when you are suspecting pituitary deficiencies in an individual? Since pituitary secretes number of trophic hormones, so we have to do stimulation test for various hormones. So for ACTH, we can do insulin tolerance test, which we have discussed in last class, where peak cortisol response should be more than 18 microgram per deciliter, or cortisol should increase by 7 microgram per deciliter. But Thyropon, CRS stimulation test, ACTH stimulation test. For TSH, we have to measure only T4. In past, we used to TRH stimulation test. Nowadays, TRH stimulation test is not done because TRH is not available freely. For prolactin, again, there is TRH stimulation test. For LH and FSH, we have to perform GnRH stimulation test. GnRH available with the name of gonadorelin. 100 micrograms are given. LH rises by 2 to 3 fold or more than 10 international unit 60 minutes after giving GnRH, and FSH again increases by 2 fold after giving GnRH. For growth hormone, we have discussed in short stature, we have to perform either insulin tolerance test or various other stimulation tests. In children, GH should be more than 10 microgram per deciliter. But in adult age, the cutoff level of growth hormone is 5. So there is a difference in upper cutoff when we are evaluating for growth hormone deficiency in children and in adults. It is more than 5 microgram per deciliter in adult age, and it is more than 10 microgram per liter in children's. Now, once you have made a diagnosis, the last step is replacement therapy for adult hypopituitarism. Again, we have to replace various types of hormone. The beauty of endocrinology is that now we have availability of replacement hormones for virtually every hormonal deficiency. So patient can live a normal life if we make a correct diagnosis. For ACTH deficiency, we can give hydrocortisone. For TSH deficiency, we have levothyroxine. We have discussed all this. For hypogonadotropic Hypogonadism means when LH, FSH are absent. For males, we have testosterone preparations available. Various types of testosterones are available, including injectable, skin patch, and gels, which can be utilized. Similarly, we have various types of estradiol preparation, which can be given to the females or young women. Now, when fertility is desired, we take help of HCG or HCG plus HMG, where fertility can be achieved in hypogonadotropic hypogonadism. Now, for growth hormone deficiency, we have somatotropin, which is a recombinant growth hormone therapy. In children's, we give based on body weight, which is roughly, as you see here, 0.02 to 0.05 milligram per kg per day. But for adult growth hormone deficiency, there is a small dosage, fixed dosage of around 0.1 milligram subcutaneously daily, in contrast to weight-based regime in children's. For pituitary, posterior pituitary deficiency, which we are going to discuss in detail probably next class, we have desmopressin available, which can be given through nasal route to take care of increased urine production in face of vasopressin deficiency. Now, understanding the deficiency, how we are going to treat short stature in children's, and I have told you even in adults, growth hormone deficiency is seen. On one side of this table, you will see various clinical consequences of growth hormone deficiency, like increasing adiposity, reduced lean mass, reduced bone mass, reduced quality of life, reduced functional capacity, increased cardiovascular risk factor. And when you replace growth hormone, all these parameters are going to improve. Now, again, we can skip this slide. But as I've told you, in adult growth hormone deficiency, we give a fixed dose of around 0.15 to 0.3 milligram per day, and we measure IGF-1 at 1 month. We tend to keep growth hormone in low normal range. If IGF-1 levels are coming in the higher range, then we have to reduce the dose of GH. There are various side effects of growth hormone therapy in adult age, which are summarized in this slide. And as you see, right from edema, arthralgia, myalgia, carpal tunnel syndrome, AF, benign intracranial hypertension. So one must know about these side effects when you are prescribing growth hormone therapy. Coming to the last part of today's lecture about pituitary tumors. Pituitary tumor in pituitary area are quite common, and there are various ways to classify them. One way is they can be non-functioning or functioning. Non-functioning means they are not secreting any hormone. Only a mass lesion is present. Another is functioning. When it is secreting, say ACTH, it becomes Cushing's disease. A tumor which is secreting TSH becomes thyrotropinoma. A tumor which is secreting prolactin becomes prolactinoma. So there can be a non-functioning tumor, there can be a functioning tumor. Again, then the tumors can be classified based on size. If the size of the tumor is less than 10 millimeter, it is called as microadenoma. And if the size of the tumor is more than 10 millimeter, it is called as macroadenoma. This is classification where class 3, when part of the sella is involved, and class 4, when the floor is disturbed. I will show you a diagram how this area look like. Also, there is another way. Histopathologically, we can examine with the help of stain whether they are acidophilic cells or whether they are basophilic cells. The acidophilic cells secrete growth hormone and prolactin, while the basophilic cells are TSH, ACTH, LH, and FSH. So these are some small informations which are helpful to you in your future exams. This is the diagram which I was referring to you, how the normal pituitary gland look like. This is pituitary gland. This is optic chiasma. This is stalk. This is cavernous sinus. Inside cavernous sinus, this is intracavernous carotid artery, and these are various optic or trochlear abducent nerves. Now, why it is important to understand, this is floor of the sphenoid sinus, and these are sphenoid sinuses. A tumor can expand in any of the directions, and the clinical manifestation depends on the direction in which tumor is growing. As you see, optic chiasma is present on the top. So if the tumor is increasing like this, it is going to press upon optic chiasma, and which will result in a classical abnormality which is known as bitemporal hemianopia. Now, clinically, how to understand bitemporal hemianopia? If you ask historical events from the patient or from the relatives of the patient tends to eat only from center part of its plate, and remaining part of the food in the temporal sides, patient is not able to sink, so he is not consuming. Similarly, when the patient is walking in a crowd or is turning around the corner, he tend to brush his shoulder with the others because temporal part of the sight is lost. Now, depending on various areas in which the tumor is growing, patient will have clinical manifestations. So it is easy to summarize. Since the tumor is in pituitary gland, so it will result in pressure effects, and various types of hormonal deficiencies are seen, like deficiency of growth hormone, deficiency of gonadal hormones, which will result in hypogonadism, hypothyroidism, hypoadrenalism. If there is pressure on the optic tract, it will result in classical bitemporal hemianopia or loss of red perception. If there is an extension further, it will have effects on hypothalamus, where temperature, dysregulation, obesity, and so diabetes insipidus and various manifestations takes place. If tumor expands laterally, it will involve cavernous sinus, where ophthalmoplegia, ptosis, facial numbness, and so on. So again, it is easy to remember. There is no need to mug. You have just to understand this diagram. Based on this diagram, you can formulate various manifestations of pituitary tumors. Now, what are screening tests for functional pituitary adenomas? Means tumors which are secreting some hormones. So if a tumor is secreting growth hormone, it will result in a disease which is known as acromegaly. We will discuss in brief about acromegaly. Now, for acromegaly, the screening test is IGF-1. Now, growth hormone act on liver and result in secretion of IGF-1. In acromegaly, there is hypersecretion of growth hormone, which will result in increased amount of IGF-1. Now, since there is hyperfunction, so we tends to perform a suppression test. And if you remember, we have discussed some stimuli which will cause suppression of growth hormone, and one of them is glucose. So we will perform oral glucose tolerance test. We give 75 gram of oral glucose. We measure growth hormone at 0, 30, and 16 minutes under influence of 75 gram glucose. The growth hormone in a normal individual should be suppressed to less than 1 microgram per liter, but it remains more than 1 microgram per liter in individuals with acromegaly. Now, in prolactin, normally remains under inhibitory control. Its levels are less than 20 micrograms per liter. So when there is a tumor which is secreting prolactin, levels of prolactin are elevated. So if you see a level of more than 200 microgram per liter, prolactinoma is likely, and more than 500 microgram per liter, it is pathognomic of macroprolactinoma. Cushing's disease, again, we have discussed in last class in detail, so we will not repeat the same things. TSH secreting tumors, again, they secrete TSH, so FT4 will be high, and when you measure T3, T4, and TSH, both T4 and TSH are high. Now, in a classical case of hyperthyroidism primary, where T4 is high, TSH should be low. So if you are seeing T4 elevated, TSH elevated, you should suspect that there is a lesion at the level of pituitary. Now, lastly, in brief, I will discuss about acromegaly before we will finish this class. This is a classical photograph of acromegaly. I will like to stay for 10 seconds at this photograph, have a visual impression of this photograph. And why I am saying you, as the name suggests, acromegaly means increase in size of acral parts of the body. And your tip of the nose, your lips, earlobes, they are all acral parts of the body. They are increased in size. There is coarsening of facial features. And you will be surprised to know, average lag time between diagnosis of acromegaly and the disease onset is at least 10 years. Patient visits number of doctors for different diseases, and it has been said in literature that the person has visited at least 3 to 4 different specialty doctors for different diseases before finally a diagnosis of acromegaly is made. So this is a slow growing pituitary tumor. Most of the patients have macroadenoma. Diagnosis is missed for a long time. So we should have an index of suspicion so that we can pick up this disease in time and treat it successfully. Now, what are features of acromegaly? Some of the features are very easy to remember. This can be because of local tumor effect, which we have discussed. But then the effect which are related to increased amount of growth hormone. Now, growth hormone is going to act on every organ of the body. So in skin, you have oily skin, you have skin tags, you have hyperhidrosis. So just by touching hand of the patient, where you are suspecting because of acral enlargement along with oily skin, you can have an impression that this might be having acromegaly. Similarly, in musculoskeletal system, patient have prognathism, patient has carpal tunnel syndrome, proximal myopathy, and so on. So as you see, virtually every organ of the body, including carbohydrate, lipid metabolism, bone metabolism, they are affected. So we will not waste time on this slide. Everything is written in a one table. This is given even in your standard textbook of medicines. So you can see. So patient of acromegaly have huge manifestation. These are some of the photographs where you can understand. These are two brothers. You see the difference in height of the brother who is suffering from acromegaly. And you see just appreciate the hands. See the change in facial appearance. See the size of hand and feet in an individual who is having acromegaly as compared to a normal individual. Megacolon, macroglossia. Now, how macroglossia can be asked? You ask the patient to protrude tongue. There will be the marks of tooth on the side of the tongue, which is suggestive of macroglossia. You see malocclusion of teeth. So there are various manifestations of acromegaly. How to diagnose? Since acromegaly is because of growth hormone excess, so we have to perform suppression test. We do 50 or 75 gram glucose suppression test, and we measure growth hormone after 60 minutes of giving 50 gram of glucose. If levels, as I've told you, are not suppressible, it is suggestive of growth hormone deficiency. So in an individual where you have clinical features of growth hormone, you first measure IGF-1 level. If IGF-1 is elevated, which is a screening test, then you should perform growth hormone suppression test. If on growth hormone suppression test, your GH becomes suppressed, it will rule out acromegaly. If GH remains unsuppressed, GH levels remains elevated, next step is to perform pituitary MRI. In MRI, if you see a pituitary mass lesion, it's a growth hormone secreting pituitary tumor, and patient has to be subjected to surgery or medical therapies. If pituitary appears normal, then you have to perform CT scan of the chest and abdomen to find out diseases like bronchial carcinoid, which sometimes secrete growth hormone releasing hormone, which are responsible for increased secretion of growth hormone from pituitary and further subsequent manifestation. What is the treatment of choice? The treatment of choice for acromegaly is surgical resection of the tumor. As I've told you, majority of the patients are having macroadenoma, so the treatment of choice is surgical resection. If we see, there are various medical treatments. Just you should remember the name. We can give somatostatin receptor analogs, which are octreotide, lanreotide, and lanreotide autogel. These LAR preparations can be given once in a month. There is another drug, which at least you should know the name, which is pegvisomant. This is growth hormone antagonist. This will go and bind with growth hormone receptor, so will prevent the action of growth hormone. This is available in an injectable forms. In some of the cases where after surgery, residual pituitary tumor remains, we subject the patient to radiotherapy. So we would like to stop this class here. You can mark your attendance and leave the class. In next class, we will discuss about prolactin, and we will also discuss about posterior pituitary hormone deficiency, the diseases associated with diabetes insipidus, SIADH. So next time we will finish remaining pituitary gland. Thank you.